Hello, everyone, and welcome to the data science portion of this class. So for the data science and management, we're going to be using R. And for those of you who have used C++, Python, MATLAB, there's a lot of similarities and the programs are very parallel. So a lot of this may look familiar. For those of you who have not used a programming language before, don't worry. We'll give you all the information that you need to get started and learn. So we're going to be working under the third module, data management. And the very first thing that you'll see is downloading R for Windows or downloading R for Mac. And these are step-by-step video tutorials of how you want to download R onto your computer. Completely free. And this RStudio link here links you to the website to download R. So first things first, download R. And then you're also going to need to get RStudio as well. And then the icon will look like this, RStudio, and RStudio is actually where you're working in R programming. So watch the videos to make sure you're getting R and RStudio correctly downloaded, and then you want to go to RStudio and set it up how you want it. So you first have your console on the upper right-hand quadrant, and this is where all of your commands are going to be run. Then down in the bottom right-hand quadrant, you're going to have where any graphs are outputted, files are stored, packages are available, help, everything comes up in here. In the bottom left-hand quadrant, this is your environment. So this is when you're creating variables or importing tables, they're going to come up in your environment. So if you are trying to make a variable and you don't see it in your environment, well, that variable doesn't exist. Even more commonly, sometimes a variable will be named something like matrix, where matrix is the name of a variable, but it's also a command. So it can get really confusing if you're running code where your variables are the same name as a command. So you can check them in your environment. Then this is where kind of the meat of what we're going to be doing is. This is in your actual script. So these are the files that you're saving. I have a file open here right now that I've made called firstscript.r, and I'll be uploading this so you guys can have access to it because it has kind of some general rules that I've laid out for everybody. As a note, you can move these 4 quadrants around, whatever works better for your brain. I like them in this flow, but if you like something else, it's up to you. So just for some general rules, to get started under this week, there's an Intro to R web link that when you click on it, opens this website that kind of walks you through what is R, what packages should you load, how do you get help, how do you create objects, what are basic functions. So you can work through this Intro to R on your own time. And you can also watch this video, work along with me, and then the discussion section, I think it's going to start next week. It might start a few days earlier. Double check in the email. The discussion will have some additional Intro to R kind of like tutorials. So first things first, for some general rules, download R, open RStudio, get everything set up, and then hashtags are how you make comments. So when you hashtag something, it's going to come up in green writing. So if you're writing normally, it's going to be black. But if you're hashtagging it, it's a comment and it's going to be green. So as you can see here, the first part of this whole R script here is a comment that I've made. So some general rules, hashtags are comments and they don't run when you execute the code. So if I run this code, you can see that all of these are running as a comment and they're not actually giving any codes or any command to the system. So they're still showing up in my code, but they're not actually executing any code. In addition, a little arrow with a line, this first thing here, and an equal sign are the same command. So when you're creating variables like this, if you want a variable 1 and you want to do this symbol instead of an equals, these are going to be the exact same thing. One thing that's really important is to set your working directory correct. So when we're downloading data sets offline, they're going to download into possibly your data file, your downloads file, your documents file, potentially you might be working on somebody else's computer. So you need to tell R where the files you want to upload into R are located. And you do this by setting your working directory. The command to do this is set WD with the parentheses. And inside WD is where you tell it your working directory. I'm going to come back to this a little bit later. Your working directory is also in this sessions drop-down tab where you can manually set working directory and locate the file on your computer and tell it exactly where the file is if you don't want to do it by code. Parentheses and square brackets are not the same thing. Do not use them interchangeably. They are going to tell different things to the code. If you want to execute your code without having to hit this run button up here, run will run all of your code. And if the button next to it will run the code region above where you are. But what I like to do is run it one line at a time just to check that I'm doing things okay. So the way that you do that is you either on the line that you're on, or you can highlight areas, you hit this command and enter and return. So I hold down command and then I hit enter and it runs the line that I'm on. So if I'm on this line, command and enter, it runs it's running the next executable line of code. But if I'm selecting all of this area and I hit command and enter, it runs what's selected. As I said again, you can also just hit run or this run from previous line. But command enter is what I prefer. I think it's easier. We're going to be working in Swirl, which is a tutorial program in R. Just as a note, if you can't get the correct answer, you can either hit skip or info and it'll help you, just to remember that for later. And if you see a command like names with an open parentheses, the open parentheses are indicating where you can call your data frame or any of the information. So for instance, set working directory up here with the open parentheses, that open parentheses is where you're going to be inputting your actual working directory. Capitalization matters. So if you have variable capital V or variable lowercase v, those are going to be two different variables. So capitalization matters. The little lowercase c is the command to bind things. So I'll go through that in a minute, but that's the command to bind things. And if you're stuck or confused or you need help, the question mark command opens up a help document for you. So the example I gave here, for example, question mark matrix, if we were to run question mark matrix, it would pull up the help file that tells you about the command matrix. So it tells you how to enter the command matrix, everything that's about it. It gives you some examples down at the bottom. All right, so first, to create a variable, which should be stored in our environment here. To create a variable, we're going to use either the little sideways caret and a line or equals. I always use equals. So we're going to name the variable on the left, and we're going to set what the variable is equal to on the right. So I want variable 1 to be equal to 10. I'm going to hit command enter and run that line. So I've already run this before, and my variable is already here. I can also see it come up in my console. It's been executed. As I mentioned, the equal sign and the sideways caret with the line are the exact same thing. So if I want run variable 1 equals 10 again with a different equal sign, it'll give me the exact same command and it doesn't overwrite anything because I'm saying the exact same thing. If I were to change this to 100, even though I named variable 1 here, if I rerun it later after that time point with a resetting that variable, it will change that variable. So now variable 1 is 100 and it's no longer 10 because I've overridden that variable. So make sure that when you're naming variables, you're changing names as you go, not recycling names. If I want to create variable 2, once again, you just execute your command and then you can see it pop up once it's executed in my environment here. If I want to delete anything from my local environment, you can use this sweeper tool. It'll clear your objects from the workspace. And then that same sweeper tool is up here on your console if you don't want to delete everything from your console. Along with just setting basic variables, we can also work with data frames, matrices, and groups of variables. And remember in number 8, we said that the lowercase c is the command to bind. So for instance, if I want a variable of FGCU to be the combination of the word engineering, arts and science, and business, I would use this lowercase c. And since these are strings, which means they're letters, not numbers, we call those strings, that I put them in parentheses, and it turns them, similar to a comment, it turns them green. So for a lot of your data frames, your headers and column headers and row headers are going to be strings, and that we're going to need to make sure that those are kind of handled differently than numbers. So I'll run my variable FGCU, and we can see now my variable FGCU is going to be the characters or the strings of engineering, arts and sciences, and business. So we're going to look a little bit more at variables and how to then analyze variables again later. The C command also works with things other than strings. So if I wanted to make another variable, say let's do FIU, and I wanted to make this a combination of the numbers 10, 20, and 30, I can again just use this C command and make this as a variable using numbers. And instead of characters here, it says numbers, 3 numbers, 10, 20, and 30. So C works as a binding for both strings and numbers. Okay, as I mentioned in general rules number 2, you wanna always check that your working directory is set correctly when you're downloading and uploading data. So the first thing that I always do is get my working directory using this command here, get wd, open parentheses. When I run this, it'll tell me what my current working directory is. So on my Mac, it's users Lauren Redfern downloads. And when I'm downloading things off of Google or Kaggle or wherever, it's downloading to my downloads. That's where I want my working directory to be. And so then to make sure that R is understanding that is the directory that I'm working in, I then use the command set wd, and I pretty much just copy this line here of code, and I can put this in my set working directory here. There's another example that's from the Intro to R webpage that's using kind of a more generic one, user/me/Dropbox/ whatever additional thing you're working in Dropbox. So if you're downloading from Dropbox, or if you have a Dropbox file because you don't want to download to your computer, that's a good option as well. So then I'm going to set my working directory as my downloads file, which it seems to be. And there's also information here for if you're using a Windows, how this might be a little bit different. It won't be users, it'll be this C. All right, we're gonna be working with Swirl early next week. So I'll be talking about this more in the next video. But for now, please just start messing around in R, making variables. We can also make variables for a lot of different things. We can make data frames and matrices as well. We can also use R to do like really basic math. So if you type in 2 + 3, it'll give you the answer. So you don't always have to be running variables or commands exactly. You can be doing like very simple math. We're going to be looking at a little bit later doing t-tests and ANOVA, so basic statistics on variables or even just sets of data. So for now, please download R, watch this video, try to create a few variables of your own, and set your own working directory. Hopefully I didn't go too fast. I thought since this is a video, you can kind of pause as I'm going, and you can also go back and look at this Intro to R website, which gives you a little more step-by-step information. Not all of it is relevant. Like you don't need to look at pseudocode. You don't really need to look at loading all of these packages, but I still think it's a really helpful website. So please email me if there are any questions, and I look forward to working with you all in R. All right. Goodbye.